Yes, I think we can start. Dear friends, colleagues and allies, welcome, warmly welcome to this important day. Ahead of the International Women's Day, we celebrate together today. We celebrate courage because we need to have courage to continue the fight for gender equality, especially in this very worrying time globally, but also here in our Europe. So I'm very happy to see so many of you attending this meeting, and I'm very happy to have here together with me our former commissioner Nicolas Schmit, now as a president for FEPS. So in a few minutes we will listen to the keynote from you, and I will give you a few words because we have called this conference Progressives and Allies Together Against the Backlash. And I will tell you that we choose those words carefully because we are witnessing today, this is not isolated setbacks, it's organized, it's strategic, and it's global. But we will start what we have received. Progress has been made. We have recognized where we are in the last decades. Our movement has achieved historic victories. We passed laws for pay transparency and protections against gender-based violence here in the Parliament. We ensured women so they can participate fully in politics, public life, and leadership positions. We strengthened access to education, healthcare, childcare, so that women do not have to choose between a career and a family. These were not just victories for women. They were also victories for men and families, for everyone who believes in fairness, equality, and democracy. But progress, you know, is never guaranteed. And there are still a lot of work to do, because 1 in 3 women in the European Union has experienced physical or sexual violence, 1 in 3. And around 20 million women in our union still lack access to safe and legal abortion. 20 million here in Europe. And we can see we have the new area, online spaces, once promised as tools of empowerment, have too often become arenas of harassment and violence. And across Europe and globally, we see coordinated attacks on sexual and reproductive health and rights. We can see anti-gender movements. You know, we have a president in the US. We don't know from day to day what will happen. And we can see shrinking spaces for feminist organizations, also here in the Parliament. So we need to continue our fight, because progressive leadership is not optional, it's necessary for gender equality. And women's rights are not a side issue. It's a very important interesting question, because we need to debate it all the time and we need to act. It's central to democracy, to freedom, and to social justice. And this backlash we can see now is really, it really weakens our democracy. And we must be the force to change. There is still a reason to hope, and I will never give up, and I know that you will never give up, because history shows that change is possible. We can see that legislation, motivation, mobilization, and solidarity can move mountains. And the European Union has the tools, the vision, and the political will to defend equality. We took a strong recommendation in the FEMM committee, and we will join the United Nations Commission for Women next week. And of course, we will act for a more global responsibility there. So our strength lies in standing together across borders, generations, and political divides. And with that said, it's my great pleasure to invite you, Nicolas Schmit. I mentioned that you are a former commissioner. You were responsible for equality, for social justice, for the labor market. And you know that I always say that we still miss women in the labor market. We need women's competence. And we are all appreciate that you are here in your new role. And I will hand over to you. Warmly welcome.
Thank you very much. Well, first, it's a great pleasure to be here again. So it's some time ago when I was sitting here as a commissioner. Now I'm sitting in a different capacity, and especially for this event, for this moment, it is for me very, very important to be part of this event. Well, International Women's Day is much more than a symbol, and because when we look at the situation, we see that, and you have mentioned it in your speech, that important progress have been achieved, but there is still a lot to do. And as Social Democrats, our major aim is to fight for equality. And equality starts with equality between men and women. For socialists and social democrats, this day has a very special meaning. Our combat for equal societies, for fairness, for equal opportunities, has, since the very beginning of our movement, also meant equality between men and women, between women and men. And we have been at the forefront of this essential combat. In Europe, as well as in the United States, more than 100 years ago, there were social democrats in the United States, by the way, and particularly social democratic women who claimed equal rights at all levels, including work, and at that time, especially also political equal rights, because at that time, women did not have yet the voting right. We opposed since the beginning all forms of discrimination. And it was a German social democrat, Clara Zetkin, who proposed at the Socialist International of Women meeting in 1910 in Copenhagen, this International Women's Day, which finally was taken up by the UN in 1975, so quite a few years after. And as socialists, let's be proud for this historic movement. But as you explained, it has not yet come to an end. There is progress in many areas, but there are still a lot of discrimination. According to a global gender gap report of 2024, it will still take another 134 years to reach gender parity, not to talk about the oppression women are daily victims of in countries like Afghanistan and others, and the higher share of women and girls living in poverty. So, for us, for Social Democrats, equality between women and men is essential. There is no sustainability without this equality. And this is also written very clearly in the pillar of social rights under point number 2. Equality between men and women at work, but in all areas. In the EU, we still have not reached wage equality. The wage gap is still more than 10%, and that's an average. It's much more in some countries. So we still have to fight for something we should consider as absolutely normal, that for the same work, women earn exactly the same amount as men. And that is not yet achieved in the European Union, despite the fact that in the treaty of 1957, this principle was written in the treaty itself, and we are not yet there. So I would just say a few words on what my former colleague, Elena Dalli, in the previous commission has done with the EU Pay Transparency Directive. She was the main coordinator for this directive, and this directive should be implemented soon, because it's by June 26. And we have to be very cautious and very clear, because what I hear now is that some areas, some quarters, mainly in Business Europe, are questioning the content of this directive and ask finally to reopen the negotiation of this directive. Let's be blunt and clear. It cannot be that under the idea of simplification, such a crucial, fundamental directive could be opened. So we have, as Social Democrats, because it was done, by the way, under the responsibility of a Social Democratic commissioner in the previous commission, that we could accept a reopening of a directive, which, by the way, should definitely enter into force quite soon. So this, I would say, should be a clear message. I do not believe that the Commission now has the intention to propose a reopening under this simplification, which finally is very often not a simplification, but a deregulation. Let's be blunt on that. But it has to be clear from our side that this is not acceptable. We have, by the way, to tackle absolutely this pay discrimination, which is, as I said, still a reality in the European Union. And this directive, which was adopted under our social democratic influence under the previous Commission, represents a game changer. And people always, when they do not like, when they want to finally go a step backwards, they always say, well, it's too bureaucratic, we have to simplify. No, here it's not a question of simplification, it's a question of fundamental rights. So, dear friends, there is a no-go with us to do that. So we have to stick to what has been negotiated, approved also by the Parliament, and, by the way, also by the Council. Well, this shows also that equality, and you mentioned it, equality is never achieved forever. Equality between men and women is a permanent fight. It's something which you have reconquered permanently. And especially now, the extreme right is fighting this fight against equality, is fighting this idea of gender equality. When you look what happens in the US, where the word gender you cannot even use anymore. You cannot even use it anymore. This shows the evolution. And this is also the case, by the way, in Europe already. So we are really, and I mentioned the historical evolution, We are really those who have to defend, to save the right and equality between women and men. We are in the forefront of this important fight. Migrants are not the only victims of the extreme right. Women are also the victims, including the right to abortion, which is also equally threatened. Now, I'm coming from a country I considered always to be rather conservative. Now we have written the right to abortion into the Constitution. And we have to write the right of women to abortion also in our text, because this is for women the fundamental right. But we know that this is a cultural fight. It's a cultural fight between the extreme right, quite often, not always, not in Luxembourg it was not the case, quite often supported by the conservatives who hide behind the extreme right. So we have to be vigilant on that. Violence against women is one of the most frequent human rights violations. And I just take one country, Spain, because you are from Spain. When you read and when you hear what the extreme right is saying, but they are not different from the extreme rights in Germany, not from the other countries' extreme right. And that's why we have to be vigilant, because the equality, which is already not perfect, which we have achieved, really has to be defended. And that's why it's also important to transpose the implementation of the Violence Against Women Directive. Our combat against the extreme right is also a combat for equality of rights, and especially equality of rights for women. Well, we have to welcome the new gender equality strategy that the Commission will adopt or has adopted, I think, today. It is an absolute necessity to reaffirm that gender equality is a core value of the EU. Reaffirming is not enough. What we need now is are rapid, concrete steps. It is the implementation of the different principles of the roadmap of this strategy. And I want to finish with one important aspect we have to seriously follow up on. It's the equality and the digital age. With the different dimensions this issue has. First, equality on the labor market, because we see that precisely in the digital economy, women are still absolutely underrepresented. And when we know that now with the digital evolution, everything becomes digital, with all the consequences we do not yet see exactly what they will be, it is fundamental that this gap has to be reduced and just changed. And the second point is about platforms and the protection of our values of equality. It's about the DMA, but also the DSA. And we have seen now in recently how inequality, how women harassing has become a normal thing, even on X. And this has to be combated absolutely by us. So we have really to show a clear opposition against the US and its techno-oligarchs, which consider that as a form of freedom. No, it's a form of oppression, and that's what it is. And finally, artificial intelligence and the stereotypes. Algorithms are not neutral, absolutely not neutral. And very often, be it in the job or in other areas, these algorithms are not in favor of equality. Very often, they are in favor of discrimination, of inequality, especially inequality between men and women. So we see that our fight has to go on, and that we have to use this day as a day to encourage us to continue fighting, to defending equality, which is the most precious good socialists have. equality, and equality starts between women and men. So I think that we have to keep this strong tradition which started at the beginning of the 20th century. And I think that we, the socialists and social democrats, we are the real feminists. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nicolas, for setting the tone so clearly and also remind us about the connection between social justice and gender equality. So thank you so much, and we look forward to have the dialogue together with you and FEPS because we need each other in this fight and we need to continue together. So many, many thanks to you and to all of us here. Now we have to continue the program for the day. And you see that we will have 3 different panels, and the 3 panels will be led by my dear friends and colleagues from the FEMM committee, Lina, Joanna, and Emma. And we start with you, Lina. Lina Gálvez, please.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me.
So what a great president of the commission we missed of our Spitzenkandidat candidate, Nicolas Schmit. Next time, Nicolas, next time, I hope for the next election you will run again, and probably the commission will be very different if we will have you running and leading this commission. So let's move to our first round table for today discussion, and which is the panel 1, countering the digital backlash. Before I introduce our guest speakers, I would like just to make a very, very brief introduction. I mean, countering the digital backlash, it is not only countering the backlash in the digital arena or only a digital dimension, as Helen was saying before, as countering the global backlash, that it is taking space and amplifying in an enormous way through the digital world. But it is a global backlash that, as it had been said, it is organized, it is very strategic, and it is extremely well financed. Extremely well financed. That is what we have in front of us, and they have been already doing for a while, and they have taken space in the digital arena very easily, and they are really denying our rights and denying our body autonomy, denying our freedom. And they normally are saying that we went too far when we just have not arrived yet. Nicolas was mentioning a few numbers of all the gaps we have, pay gap and other gaps here in our political representation. For the first time in this mandate, women we have decreased in our representation here in the European Parliament. We were over 40% in the previous term, and in this one we are 38.5%. For the first time, we are going down, and it is because there are a bigger representation of political families or parties that are denying the very same idea of equality. They are denying gender equality. They are denying gender-based violence and only using it for other ends. They are instrumentalizing, especially sexual violence for other ends that are going against migration, Islamophobia, xenophobia, etc., and etc. And they are putting the anti-equality and anti-gender at the core of their strategies, at the core of their narratives, at the core of the political action. That is what we have in front of us. And that is to what we need to react, especially putting at the core also of all of our political action, also in a very strategic way, possibly not as well financed as they are, that's for sure, but we can put it on really at the heart of our political action, everything regarding equality. Because as I normally say many times at the FEMM committee, we are 10 more million women at the European Union, and we are too far from reaching any parity. So I always said we are generous when we are talking about parity, because we are a bit more than that. And of course, we have to oppose to what also Nicolas was saying, that this simplification will not take away directives of the pay transparency when they have not yet even been implemented. When we are not yet there, we are saying, we are listening that we went too far. And again, I would like to say very loud that we did not went too far because we have not yet arrived. So just a couple of more issues regarding the digital arena. We know we have included digital violence within the directive on combating violence against women that will be implemented in the different member states. Member state has until July 27 to do it. So we really need to ask each one of our member states to do it as soon as possible. In Helene's case, my case, Sweden or Spain are already advanced on that. So probably even we have the consent-based legislation already in our legislation, but there are many other countries that really need to advance on it. We have the DSA here also that make a big platform responsible for what is happening in the platform, so they could be enforced in a much better way than it has been done so far. So this is another tool. Definitely we have, but at the end, we need also to fight for equality as a whole, not as in the only limited to the digital world, because what is reflecting and amplifying this digital world is the misogyny. It is the patriarchal and very anti-women, anti-feminist movement that are going on. Just to share with you here, the European Parliament has released this very simple one, with some data from the 2024 Eurobarometer, and they have called Silencing Women in Silencing Democracy. Because what is happening also in the internet, that we thought it was a public space, but indeed it's a private space. And we really need to regulate, obviously, this private space to become as more public as possible. What is happening is that women, especially women in the public arena, are suffering attacks and violence much more than men. We know that, for instance, if we take all the deepfakes, 90% are sexual, and among this one, 90% are down to women and girls. So it is disproportionately concentrated on women. But just if we take the Eurobarometer, and there is still a 43% of Europeans that consider or think that women share some responsibility if intimate pictures are leaked without consent. May I repeat? 43% think women share some responsibility if intimate pictures are leaked without consent. 21% think women should accept sexist or abusive replies when sharing opinions on social media. So we have over 1/5 of Europeans justifying that we should receive that violence just because we are saying what we think we have to say or we want to say. This is the reality we really need to fight back. So, having said that, I now, yes, would like to, if I find where I have you, here it is. So, I start this discussion with Mrs. Laura Kaun, Head of Public Affairs at the Center for Countering Digital Hate, and also Mrs. Madeleine McLure, European Union Policy and Public Affairs Officer at the Internet Watch Foundation. So I will make a question to one for each other, starting by Laura. Laura, can you introduce us to a very important report you produced on deepfake, disinformation, and its consequences both on women and girls, but also on democracy in general? And for Madeleine, at the Internet Watch Foundation, you're working on the ground of eliminating child sexual abuse imagery online, and you do so with a survival-led advocacy approach. So can you tell us more about your observations on technology-assisted abuse and guide us through the most effective tools to combat, if so, we can support this fight in the European Parliament? So any one of you, the one that wants to start?
I'm happy to start.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for this introduction and for convening this discussion at such a critical moment in time. And yeah, we have a lot of things still to do. And we are here today to talk about digital backlash, and I want to be very clear about what that means for all of us here today. It is no longer just about hateful posts or individual acts of harassment. It is about platform design choices that industrialize misogyny. It is about AI systems that scale the sexualization and intimidation of women. And it's about whether European law will be enforced when those harms become systemic. 3 million sexualized images, out of which approximately 23,000 of children in only 11 days. This means thousands of sexualized images per hour, and most of them depicting women. This is the result of Elon Musk's recent AI notification tool, much talked about Grok. For the Center for Countering Digital Hate, this is not a sporadic misuse, and this is not a fringe phenomenon. This is an automated, scalable harm pathway embedded into the design of a very large online platform. It is a pathway to harm and gender-based violence. This is happening globally, but it is completely preventable. What we found should concern anyone who cares about women's rights, democratic participation, and child protection. And we must understand what this means for women in their daily lives. The mass generation of sexualized imagery, whether of politicians, journalists, activists, or any other women, is not trivial, even when it does not meet the strict threshold of non-consensual intimate imagery or CSAM. The effect is profound. It enables humiliation, it enables harassment, it enables intimidation. For women in politics especially, this creates a chilling effect. It reinforces entrenched misogyny and signals that public participation will be met with sexual degradation. And for minors, the implications are even more alarming. The Digital Services Act addresses such harms by identifying gender-based violence as a systemic risk that online platforms need to assess and mitigate. X's own systemic risk assessment under the DSA identifies gender-based violence and non-consensual nudity as high inherent risks. It explicitly acknowledges that generative AI could increase the creation and dissemination of such content. Yet, what we are seeing is not a credible prevention. It is deployment first, mitigation later. And when harms are not remediable, when images can be downloaded, shared, and weaponized, labeling alone and delayed takedowns are not enough. The DSA mandates upstream prevention and design-based mitigation. The integration of Grok into X is not a minor feature update. It is structural design choice that predictably increases the scale and the speed of sexualized content generation. And X could have and should have accounted for that. Now let me turn to the AI Act. Generally purpose AI models like the one powering Grok are covered by the AI Act's transparency and risk obligations. The General Purpose AI Code of Practice, which XAI has signed, exists precisely to address systemic risks, such as generation of non-consensual intimate imagery and child sexual abuse material. Grok should qualify as a general purpose AI model with systemic risk. That means robust risk assessment. It may mean filtering training data. It may mean behavioral safeguards built into the model. It certainly means accountability. The AI Office has an opportunity here to demonstrate that the AI Act is not theoretical, it is enforceable. But at the same time, in the EU, we are seeing discussions of stop-the-clock measures, suspending of high-risk obligations, and proposals that would allow providers to assess their own risks and systems. This creates legal uncertainty and signals to AI companies that compliance is optional and negotiable. Our research shows what happens when deployment outpaces enforcement. AI should serve EU citizens. It should not industrialize the sexualization of women and girls. So what needs to happen now? First, under the DSA, open investigations into X should be concluded rapidly, specifically examining whether X properly assessed and mitigated the risks associated with deploying Grok. The Commission should require demonstrable safety by design measures. Second, under the AI Act, the AI Office should treat Grok as a test case for enforcement of the General Purpose AI Code of Practice. Deepfake labeling guidelines under Article 50 must be concluded swiftly, and Parliament and Council should resist weakening core obligations through the AI Omnibus. Because this is not just a compliance issue. This is about whether women can participate in public life without being algorithmically degraded. This is about whether children are protected when AI systems are integrated at scale. And this is about whether Europe's digital rulebook has meaning. The digital backlash against women is evolving. It is now automated, scalable, and embedded in platform infrastructure. Our laws anticipated system risk. Now we must enforce them. But legislation alone will not solve this. We must also confront the social reality behind these numbers. The overwhelming use of these tools to sexualize and degrade women reflects something deeper than technical flaw. It reflects a backlash. AI is weaponized predominantly by men to intimidate women and to push them out of the public space. This is part of a wider democratic challenge, an era in which hardcore women's rights are being contested and misogyny is being normalized and technologically amplified. If we are serious about countering the backlash, we must strengthen democratic culture through education, digital literacy, accountability, and clear societal norms that show that intimidation of women, whether online or offline, is unacceptable. Platforms and regulators have legal duties, but societies also have responsibilities to defend women's equal participation in public life. Choose to fight for protecting European citizens and not for big tech billionaires. Thank you very much.
Thank you much. Thank you very much, Laura. How important it is also for everybody to listen to that, as we did also the FEMM committee. because sometimes when we face, or especially young girls face those problems with the internet or in the real life, they think it's a personal problem, it's their problem. But we need to know, it is a structural problem, and as a political problem, we really need to face it. So Madeleine, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. And that's a particularly sort of relevant introduction as well to what I'm going to be talking about. I am going to be focusing on AI-generated child sexual abuse material, which is what we focus on at the Internet Watch Foundation. So I just want to kind of preface this with a bit of a trigger warning. This is not safe necessarily for everyone in the room today, so if at any point you do want to excuse yourself, I will not be in any way offended and completely understand. First of all, just by way of introduction, it might be useful just to know a little bit more about what the Internet Watch Foundation does and what we aim to do. So we are an NGO, we're UK-based, we were established in 1996, so we'll be celebrating our 30th year this year. And our mission is to eliminate child sexual abuse material from the internet. So we call that CSAM, and I will be using the term CSAM today. We are Europe's largest hotline and provide the reporting platform for individuals in the UK, but also in 54 other countries across the world. So that's over 2.7 billion people can report to the IWF if they should stumble on CSAM in their travels across the internet. And we're also a little bit special, if we do say so ourselves, because we have proactive searching powers from the UK government. So that means that we can actively look on the open web, both the clear web that you and I use every single day, probably, and also the dark web, which I assume we probably use less. But we can look for CSAM on the open web. And that means that our analysts are at the forefront of trends and tend to be the first to sound the alarm when something new has come over the horizon in terms of the proliferation of CSAM online. Just as an indication of the scale of the problem of child sexual abuse material online, in 2024, our analysts actioned just over 291,000 web pages. So that's URLs. Those URLs can show 1 image, 10 images, 100 images, 1,000 images. So that should give you an indication of the scale. Last year, so 2025, our 35 or so analysts actioned 312,000 URLs. And just since I'm here in the European Parliament, I might just drop in that 62% of the content in 2024 was hosted within the European Union's borders. And in 2024, 97% of the reports that we actioned where sex was recorded showed the sexual abuse of girls only. So that's 97%. And as I mentioned, as our analysts are proactively searching the internet, and that's the bulk of the reports that they handle are found proactively, they spot these trends basically as soon as they start occurring. And in 2023, we were among the first to sound the alarm about the advent of generative AI being used to create CSAM. And at the beginning, I mean, the AI CSAM, its trajectory has pretty much followed the trajectory of AI more generally. So at the beginning, there were noticeable deformities, there were strange things about the images. Our analysts could tell that these were AI images. That, unfortunately, is a difficult thing to say, but it's true, has changed now. And these images and videos are photorealistic. So our analysts often can't tell that an image or a video has been created using AI. Actually, one of the only ways that they often know that an image or a video has been created using AI is because they know the children that are depicted. So because they are on the internet every single day, are very familiar with the victims of child sexual abuse, they know when in a situation that a child is depicted in did not happen. And indeed, we have seen in the last year a 26,000% increase in the number of AI-generated videos of child sexual abuse. So that's a ridiculous number. No one deals in 26,000% increases, but that is from 2 videos in 2024, action for removal, up to over 3,000, nearly 3,500. And those videos are becoming increasingly long and increasingly sophisticated. And what we also see is that AI-generated CSAM is more severe. So it depicts more severe situations. Content is assessed under UK law, so if it is an illegal image, it will be given a grading from category C to category A. Category A is the most severe. From all our content assessed under UK law in 2024, 43% was assessed category A, so the most severe category. For AI CSAM, that number was 65%. So offenders are not only using these tools to create, new scenarios, they're also creating more extreme scenarios. And relevant for our discussion today, 98% of the AI material that we actioned for removal in 2024 depicted girls. So it's 97% for all our material, but 98% for AI. That's obviously only a 1% difference, but the vast, vast majority of this material is of girls. And sometimes we're met with this idea that maybe AI CSAM might be better in some way, that it might be preferable as a sort of therapeutic substitute, or, if you're going to view this material, then it may as well be fake. And we would counter that very strongly with, and there's a very good example of why that is not the case, and that is not an acceptable way of thinking about this material. What we see is that, and it's long since been recognised, offender communities have favourite children, so they have favourite victims, favourite survivors, and their material is now being used to train models. So we're seeing fine-tuned models, which means models which have been optimised based on specific survivor victims. And these models are free to download, often on the clear web. So on the open web that, as I say, you and I use every day. And that means that these offenders can potentially create limitless imagery of these children using the original source abuse imagery. And it is well recognised, even before AI CSAM, one of the number one demands from victims and survivors of child sexual abuse is that their material is removed from the online world. That is because of that ongoing re-victimisation and psychological torture of knowing that your abuse imagery is out there online. Survivors often talk about walking into a room and not knowing if someone in there has seen imagery of their abuse. If you can imagine that now they have lost control of it altogether, in that abusers are using that imagery, training models in a very, very deliberate way, and then creating situations that they were not in. It's unthinkable that anyone could suggest that this is in some way an acceptable use of this technology. And just to bring that to life, at the IWF, we've talked for some years about a young girl that we call Olivia. So Olivia was abused, she was brutally abused by someone she trusted between the ages of 3 and 8, and she was rescued when she was 8 years old. And her abuse imagery has unfortunately been extremely popular online, and it's been in circulation for some years. She's now in her mid-20s. And our analysts counted over a period of 1 month how frequently they saw imagery of Olivia. And they found, on average, that they saw her imagery 5 times a day. A couple of years ago, our analysts documented on a dark web forum someone asking whether anyone has trained a LoRa, so that's a low-rank adaptation model, on Olivia's material yet. So yes, just a couple of other points about why this is so harmful and why we think it's so important that the EU's existing legislation and legislation that could yet be implemented is really brought to bear on this harm. The Children's Commissioner for England published last year research on nudification tools, so-called nudification tools, which documented very real behavioural changes in girls who have either been targeted by these types of programmes or feel that they are at threat of being targeted. And they found that girls explicitly reduce their online presence and activity as a result of the threat. And for us, this is a pattern of behaviour that's very similar to the way that women and girls have to limit their activity, limit their presence offline. So it's very similar to the experience of, feeling that you can't walk home on your own, feeling that you have to put your keys between your fingers, that type of thing. We're now seeing actually that even in the online space, women and girls are not safe, and as a precautionary measure are forced to retract themselves from that dangerous space rather than being able to participate fully as equality would suggest. So in terms of legislation, because you asked about the tools, I won't go into the AI Act because that's already been covered, but the Child Sexual Abuse Directive, the recast of the Child Sexual Abuse Directive is currently in trilogues. We're very supportive of the Parliament's very ambitious proposal to fully criminalise AI CSAM, including for so-called personal use, and also the models that are used to create this type of imagery, as well as instructional materials, which might help someone who is hoping to make this type of material. We would also say that the amount of CSAM circulating online is also a huge part of the problem. So these AI models do not get their data sets from nowhere. They're scraping large amounts of data, which will probably have CSAM within it because it's so prevalent online anyway. So we would call on legislators to pass as urgently as possible the child sexual abuse regulation, which would see the amount of CSAM online reduced. And lastly, we would like a full ban of nudify tools. These tools are only used to humiliate, to extort, to exclude people from spaces. They're disproportionately used on women and girls, and they have no proper use. I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. So thank you so much. Well, you were saying that there are some people that consider that it is not too bad. It's much better to do with artificial intelligence because at least it's not real. I mean, it remember me when they were saying, oh no, we should support prostitution because if we allowed prostitution, which at the end is just exploitation of women, it will be less rape. So it's like naturalizing that abuse is normal, it's natural, that exploitation is natural, or that raping and violating is natural. There is nothing natural on that, definitely, and we have to know that the boundaries in between the digital world and the so-called real world does not exist anymore. So the digital violence could very easily be converted into physical, psychological, and long life kind of violence affecting especially women and girls. So us as feminists and socialists, obviously we will keep fighting and making the best of our legislation and the enforcement of those laws to combat any type of violence against women, and now including this very one that is running faster than us, that it is the digital violence that we really need to find more specific tools and to combat from many different angles. And now we move to my voice, my rights, and I would like to call on stage my colleague Joanna Scheuring-Wielgus, the coordinator of the FEMM committee. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, we will quickly move to the second panel because I'm looking for a time. After that, we have the last panel and projection of the film. Good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to introduce our second panel. My Voice, My Rights, or how Trump and other far-right actors coordinate at the global level to undermine SRHR, and how European progressive can push back. Like you see in this panel, we will talk about women's rights and especially sexual and reproductive health and rights. And this is a topic very close to me because I was fighting for women's rights in Poland for years, like an activist and a politician as well. It is also a very good topic to talk about because just last week we finished the first, I think the second step of the work of the My Voice, My Choice. The first was on the plenary in December. The second was the answer of the Commission. And we will see what will be happening in the future. And because of that, I am very happy we will be in contact with Nika Kovač, the leader of My Voice, My Choice. She will be with us online. We also have with us Katrine Thomasen from Center of Reproductive Rights, who is a great expert. She helped us a lot with our work here. She is also with us, I hope, online. And finally, we will have Florence Raes, Director of UN Women in Brussels. But before I will give the floor to my guests, I just wanted to say a few words. Of course, we have huge issues in the world. There is a war in Ukraine, there is a war in the Middle East now, and every day there is something huge happening. But unfortunately, on top of a very sad news we have every day, there is a one thing happening slowly but surely: backlash against women's rights. We know that anti-gender movements have been working to destroy women's rights in a lot of countries, in Poland, in France, in EU, and in United States. But we have some changes from last year. Donald Trump became president, and Donald Trump loves anti-gender movements. They support him, and he supports them. That's why now those anti-gender movements do not have to work from the shadows. They work together with the US government. This is something new in our reality. What we know that US wants to silence NGOs, US also stop funding UN Women. Even what we know, the organization of CSW in New York is not sure if because of the Trump. CSW cannot happen in New York. Maybe it will be the future like that. But I would like to promise you, if it will be happening like that, we will organize CSW in Brussels. But enough about US. We are in the heart of Europe, and we have our own agenda. And I would like, and I hope Nika is with us, and I would like to give the floor to Nika. And my question to Nika, we are with Nika. Nika, are you? Yes, hi.
Hello,
Hi,
I'm
hi.
here. Hey.
Hi, good afternoon. Nice to see you.
Same.
I would like to ask you, maybe this is the most important questions now. What are the next steps with My Voice, My Choice?
Yeah, okay. So,
I think it will be
hi.
the best question for you.
Yeah, so hi to all of you. Firstly, I really wanted to thank Social Democrats for everything that you did in this fight. We really always felt at home with you, and for us it was like one of our biggest protectors. My Voice, My Choice started with a very simple idea, which is that 20 million of women in Europe do not have access to safe abortion, with very simple idea that we know that women are dying for decades, that we know what is the situation in Malta, in Poland, in Croatia, in Italy, and that we need to do something about it. And basically, we came up with this very simple idea that European Union needs to somehow fund abortions for women who are coming from the places where it is not safe, to have an abortion when abortion is not legal, and to travel to other places where they can have them. And last Thursday, which now seems like years ago, after a lot of barriers, we got an answer from the Commission that yes, this is possible. We need to say that we loved the European Parliament, we had such a good experience with all of you, but European Commission is a different animal, and it's not an animal which would be close to us. So we almost got a no, then they managed to change their minds, and now there is a clear pathway for women to get a safe and accessible abortion. What are the next steps? I always say that team needs 1 week of rest now so that we can get our strength back. We were working on this campaign for 3 years. Then we have elections in Slovenia. But after this, we will be really, really fighting that countries will opt in and say, we will be part of this project. We want to make sure that in the next budgets there are money and allocated funds for this. And also that somehow European Union establish information system for women that they will know that these things could be covered. So these are the next steps about abortion rights. But then there are some things that we really want to support. I know your great work on yes means yes and redefinition of rape. And these are also stuff that are close to us. So I always say that you will not get rid of us.
Thank you, Nika, and thank you for your support for Yes Means Yes. It will be a very important issue for us. It will be on the session in Brussels. I think it will be something very, very important for every country in Europe when we will win, and I hope we will win. Okay, and now I would like to give the floor to Florence. Florence, are you with us?
No, the other one online.
Online? No, online. She is online?
What's she called?
Katrine. Katrine? Okay, Katrine, you are with us. And yes, I know that you are very active in My Voice, My Choice as well. But my question to you is, can you share with us your legal analysis of how the backlash against women's rights is happening? And how would you, from your perspective, continuing fight for My Voice, My Choice? I'm asking about that because, like we know, the commissioner is a very conservative, and we have to find money for My Voice, My Choice in the special social fund. Like we know, here in the Social Democrats, it will be very, very difficult. The floor is yours, Katrine.
Thank you so much, Joanna, for the kind introduction and for the opportunity to be part of this event. I think, as other speakers have recognized earlier, we're witnessing coordinated and transnational efforts to stall progress and roll back sexual and reproductive health and rights, and to also weaken civil society and human rights defenders working to advance these rights. And I think what we're seeing is that these threats and challenges are manifesting despite significant global progress to advance sexual and reproductive health and rights. And in fact, over the past decade, we have seen many countries, including across Europe, have strengthened legal frameworks and legal protections for sexual and reproductive health and rights. But I think one of the new challenges that we are facing now is resulting from very recent US foreign policy measures that really are the most far-reaching attacks on sexual and reproductive health and rights that we have seen in decades. The US administration has introduced a new policy, an expanded global gag rule. It's now called the Promoting Human Flourishing in Foreign Assistance Policy, and it took effect just last week. And this new policy will now affect vast amounts of US foreign policy and humanitarian assistance. It will apply not just to foreign NGOs, but also to multilateral organizations, to foreign governments and US-based civil society organizations. And it has been expanded to not just affect abortion-related activities, but also efforts to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to promote gender affirmative care. And so this new policy we expect will impact more than 30 billion in US funding across 160 countries. And we're expecting that this will have profound implications for global health, for human rights and development agendas, and of course for the enjoyment of sexual and reproductive health and rights across the world. And it comes off the dismantling, as everybody knows, of USAID last year, and the defunding of UNFPA and UN Women, and the US withdrawal from the Human Rights Council. And so it's really part of a deliberate US effort to defund and reshape gender equality and SRHR globally, and while seeking to also weaken all of our multilateral institutions and the accountability system. And so I think that this is a time where European response and action is really needed, and that we have seen how these US policies and measures are really emboldening anti-rights agendas and actors also in Europe. And we see a pollination of the strategies that are used to advance anti-rights and anti-SR agendas across the world. And so in the same way that I think we saw European policymakers be really galvanized after the US Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, we are now at a moment again where European policymakers need to take very strong action and step up to protect and continue to advance SRHR. And I can maybe just add that I think from our perspective, what we see is that the most effective antidote to anti-rights and anti-SRHR mobilization is continued advancement of these rights. And so what we need is continued legal reforms. We need investments in access to health services and to accurate information and education. It's so important that young people across Europe have access to comprehensive sexuality education so that they can access accurate and good information, and that this is really a key strategy for building resilience to protect us from threats of regression. And of course, we really need continued investment and solidarity to meet the global SRHR challenges that we are now facing.
Thank you, Katerina, for your presentation. And of course, this is very important. European response is very important. And of course, this is very important for all European policies maker. And I think it was a good presentation before our next panel. I see Emma, she just came, but I would like to give the floor to Florence from UN Women. And what is your perspective on that, and how can you counter these attacks from anti-gender movements? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Chair. And I think I'll try to take us maybe one level. I don't know if before, up, or after attacks on SRHR and online violence and much more being phenomena of the backlash, right? And as such, we experience, of course, the shrinking space for women and girls, but we don't experience it in a vacuum. I think it's been mentioned already, those go hand in hand with backsliding of democracy, shrinking civic space, and attacks on multilateralism. So it's very well organized. I think Lina mentioned it. It is very well coordinated, but mostly it is very well funded. We're talking about 1.78 billion versus 0.4 ODA going to women's organizations, roughly. So the comparison is quickly made, and it's not just about money, it's about voice, it's about power, but indeed, if we want to push forward and not backwards, we need better alliances, more resources. I think the issues of violence against women in public life have been mentioned. They've been mentioned especially online, but maybe I'll take you through some data from UN Women's research in other regions as well. We don't work solely in the EU or Europe, and actually we mostly work on other continents. And from the interviewees with parliamentarians, we noticed, or the answer was that 82% of women parliamentarians globally reported experiencing psychological violence, 82%. 1 in 3 women parliamentarians reported threats of physical violence, including death threats. And 65% reported sexist remarks. I think we hear them and we see them on our TVs in Europe. We don't need to go very far for that, right? We have the same when we think and talk about journalists. Female journalists are another target in the public space. 73% of them have experienced online violence, 73%. Now, 20% said that it moved from online to offline abuse, because I think it was mentioned before, you're not safer behind your screen than in the street, actually. So when we're targeting specifically, I'm thinking also, sadly, about human rights defender Yamar Mohammed in Iraq, who was assassinated outside of her home on Monday for calling on women's rights, nothing a priori to do with the Middle East, and I don't even want to get in there. We have different names. We have other human rights defenders. So that's where it really becomes dangerous beyond what we've heard on online violence, actually. Meaning that it's not just a side effect. It is actually a very intentional effort, very coordinated, funded, like I said, to reshape who gets to participate in politics, and who will have a say, who will have a voice, and who will not. We talked already about social media, about platform regulation, but maybe what's important as well, and linking both online and offline, is to say that from those women that experienced violence, only 40% were seeking help. And mainly they seek it with family and friends. So something's wrong with the system. I mean, if we don't trust it, if it's not efficient, we need more data, we need more research to understand better. And only 10% reported to the police. This means that, and we know it, and it has been mentioned, we need more and better and more dedicated norms, laws and frameworks, I'm talking globally, I'm not talking just EU, to address the specificities of online violence. Of course, the EU has the EU Directive on Violence, maybe because it was the last in a series. I'm thinking Belém do Pará, the Maputo Protocol and others adopted in other regions. It has online violence in it, but it's not the case of other regions necessarily. We have mentioned CSW, the Convention on the Status of Women, which will take place in the next 2 weeks. And the theme is access to justice. This is a unique opportunity, and I certainly hope that UN member states will manage to agree on pushing the normative standards forward on online abuse. Now, we've talked about the regulation of platforms, but I think one element we maybe did not mention or not even brush over, and where do I derive it from? UN Women is implementing a project which is called the WIDE Initiative with the EU Commission support. It's about promoting the participation of women and youth in politics, structural barriers, building enabling environments. And one of the strong dimensions of the program, or the strong challenges women encounter, are still social norms. There are still persisting pervasive social norms, but there is now also the backlash and the underlying effects on those. So if we add to that some reflections on the funding cuts, which were mentioned by predecessors, and I certainly don't want to point fingers only at the US, and as a matter of fact, I don't think UN Women or UNFPA never were big receivers of that funding. The trends we're seeing in Europe, and I'm not just talking member states, I'm talking institutions as well, towards more transactional, short-term solutions than longer-term investments in societies, in human rights, also de facto means less funding for the UN. So we should I mean, we can look across the Atlantic, but we cannot do a lot about it. But we can do things about what the decisions are going to be for the next MFF. And this is our accountability. This is your accountability. UN Women also has come up with a set of data in terms of funding cuts, especially in the context of crisis and fragility, and the world's written of them. You wake up and it seems like there's another every day. 90% of women-led organizations or women's rights organizations have been hit by funding crisis. 47% expect to shut down within the 6 next months. 51% of those have had to cut on GBV prevention, response programs, or livelihoods. And I think when we talk precisely about an increase of online violence, we also talk about an increase in the normalization of violence. You heard the rates of acceptance still even in Europe, and certainly a sharp increase of conflict-related sexual violence, which has doubled in the past 2 years. And if we only take Sudan, it is a 200% increase. So definitely, if those women are not there and we are not supporting them, the situation will become very, very dire. I think the other dimension is that we're looking probably at, and when I say we, it's not the others, it's we, the EU, its member states and others, at short-term economies. We're looking at budgets that we think are constrained, resources are to some extent, but do we make the right choices? This is a political choice. It is not necessarily about just anti-rights movements. Of course, they're very well funded, but it is also about making the decisions on what's going to be funded, and I repeat, under the next MFF. How is it going to be funded? Linking us with a question on trackers, on targets, and others. I think the way UN Women looks at, and I'll wrap up with that, the different dimensions of the challenges that women's rights and women in communities are facing nowadays, and how we envisage the answer, of course, in alliance and partnership, is really to put women's voices and women's protagonism at the forefront. I'm here, okay, it's fine, but I'd rather have, women from Sudan, from Afghanistan come and tell you the story. And you are probably the convinced already. I see a lot of women in the room, and congratulations for the few men that are there. We need allies. But other decision it's always the same, unfortunately. 25 years in business, and it hasn't changed, and it's the same in all realities. I think we need to talk to those in the middle. I mean, of course, we're convinced, and you will have those. When we talk backlash, I think Ege did a lot of research on the narrative dimension. We will not convince them. But there's a lot of people in the middle that are easily swamped to by arguments that gender equality, it's costly, actually. Well, guess what? No, because if you don't do a gender analysis of your budget and your allocations, you're throwing money outside of the window because you don't know who needs what in your population. So I think this is one element. The other element really is that stories from the ground and from women themselves are probably the best antidote to the misinformation that goes with the gender ideology nebulous that is hanging out there. Because we're not talking about concepts or ideas, we're talking about concrete people on the ground. And I remember, I spent the 25 last years in Africa, Latin America, and Arab states, and what I saw there was probably, and I may be shocking to you, but a lot more resilience, a lot more innovation than I'm seeing since I landed in Europe. Maybe because we've taken it for granted. We thought, okay, the glass is almost full. And in those countries, it's only half full, right? The legal codes are not optimal. The justice system doesn't necessarily work. But definitely those women in I Hate the World Global South have found solutions, options, networks, and other means to get their voice across, to get in that very small window of opportunity that, as much as a governance rupture gives you for a new constitution, to get some measures in there. So my plea, not just here, but in all the spaces I'm talking to recently, is to say we need to learn from them and we need to dialogue beyond Europe. We cannot just be talking to each other because some have encountered those or similar challenges and are still standing on their foot and have still managed to find the solutions. I think our role, and I'll end on that, as UN Women, as the Parliament, as others, is really to play that convening, brokering, facilitator role and to build those alliances for women to be able to come to those power decision-making spaces and talk to decision makers where they would not have a say if we are not there necessarily. And I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Florence. Thank you, Florence. You mentioned about violence against journalists. You mentioned 72%. Yes, the statistics are terrible. And but you talked before that we are talking about concrete people. Among our guests on the hall, there is Natalia Waloch from Polish journalists. She experienced huge hate speech and huge online violence. And I would like to say, public, Natalia, you are with you. You are not alone, and we will support you so much. And now I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Emma Rafowicz. She will be continue the last panel today, Emma. And thank you so much.
Hello everyone. Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to warmly thank all of the organizers for this essential event. It reminds us all how necessary, urgent, and deeply political our struggles are, both inside the European Parliament and, just as importantly, outside of it. I would like to make a special mention of civil society, to the associations, activists, and advocates who keep up the pressure, document setbacks, support victims, and carry out our struggles into the public sphere. Without you, our institutional achievements will be meaningless. The panel we are about to begin focuses on a crucial issue, the impact of anti-gender movements and budget cuts, and how we can reorganize to ensure that women remain present, visible, and safe in the public sphere. We are facing a real offensive, a war against gender, against equality, against the very idea of emancipation. This offensive is no longer confined to the margins. It is becoming institutionalized. It is entering parliaments, including within the European Parliament. It relies on structured networks, funding, and coordinated strategies. Outside the institutions as well, influencers, so-called conservative intellectuals, and masculinist movements are flooding our media and digital spaces. They instrumentalize fear, fuel anger, and build narratives designed to delegitimize our rights. In this context, silence is not an option. Today, more than ever, it is essential to act, to speak out, and to come together, to organize collectively, to defend every gain, but also to secure new ones. Women's rights are not guaranteed. They never have been. Every generation has had to fight for them, defend them, and rebuild them. We have a responsibility to honor the feminists and activists of yesterday and to think of those of tomorrow, to resist regression and accelerate progress. It is precisely to deepen this reflection and strengthen our strategies that I am delighted to welcome our panelists in this parliament. Vladislav Veližanin from EPF and Ségolène Pruvot from European Alternatives. Thank you all for being with us. I look forward to hearing your analysis and proposals so that together we can rise to the political moment we are facing. Thank you all. Vladislav, I start with you. It's okay. You work at the European Parliamentary Forum for Sexual and Reproductive Rights, and you took part into the redaction of a report called The Next Wave, How Religious Extremism is Regaining Power. Can you maybe tell us what are the key findings of this report, and how can we counter the strategies of these extremists to effectively protect sexual and reproductive rights at the European level? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for this opportunity to share findings from our research. We have indeed this is the third major report that DPF has published under the leadership of our Executive Director, Neil Datta, and I have indeed been assisting in researching the next wave. The main finding is in the title, How Religious Extremism is Retaking Power. So it's really about very extreme, very anti-women, anti-gender ideas coming closer to being in a position of power, pursuing an agenda that is much further than just eroding women's rights, but in fact questioning the very secular and democratic governance system that we have and that's been built over decades. And this contestation of women's rights and contestation of the so-called gender ideology serves as a unifying agenda of various anti-democratic forces that we are seeing rising currently. But it's not always been like that. So also in this research, we map out a little bit how this movement has developed. And let me briefly share that with you. So it started out as a religious idea from, in the 1990s among the Catholic thinkers. There was this opposition to progress on gender equality, and it was called, gender ideology. So it was being contested from religious point of view. Then it kind of transfused into civil society, where we still see it very actively to this day. But from civil society, it has moved on to politics. And in politics, there's been an evolution, whereas maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was mainly the Christian Democrats who would support some anti-gender initiatives, and they would be the main kind of political leaders on that, but they were not ambitious enough. And now we see that increasingly it is the far right and increasingly anti-democratic far right parties that are taking over the anti-gender agenda, incorporating it in their platforms and using it to consolidate their support. So now really politics is the epicenter where anti-gender initiatives are the most powerful, the most dangerous to women's rights, and where they have moved and developed the most forcefully in the recent years. From there on, now that these parties have grown, they're getting budgets, sometimes state budgets, to organize their own think tanks, and these think tanks are producing also some kind of ideological knowledge about opposing the gender equality and things like that. And we see even that it is becoming a topic of contestation on the geopolitical level, as here the previous speakers have also mentioned the United States and the Trump administration, and I will get to that in a few moments. So it has developed across these 5 dimensions, and politics really is the most worrying of them. We've analyzed 275 organizations in Europe and Russia that are involved in anti-gender contestation, and we found that these organizations between 2019 and 2023 received an equivalent of $1.2 billion. So it's quite a significant amount of funding over 5 years. It's growing year to year, and this is just gives us an idea of how much they can do with the money they have. And this is not including some countries like Germany, where we could not get any financial data because it's not publicly available. But apart from that, I also wanted to refer to what some previous speakers mentioned, that the far right is also attacking migration and migrants, and using that to consolidate their platforms. And it might seem like a separate issue, but actually we also found that it's very closely connected to the so-called anti-gender contestation. And let me just briefly share with you what we observe. We observed that anti-gender actors portray feminism and LGBTQ rights and reproductive autonomy as policies which essentially promote individualism in women and which lead to lower birth rates. And this lower birth rates is, according to the far-right actors, is what is leading to increased migration to Europe. And this is leading to so-called demographic winter and, as they say, the great replacement of people in Europe. And really the key kind of responsibility for that lies on women who got too many rights. And therefore, when they're contesting migration policies and when they're attacking migrants, they're also attacking European women who have been, who they blame of being corrupted by gender ideology and making this migration kind of possible and necessary indeed to to fill the European cities with more people. So this is obviously a conspiracy theory, to be clear, but this is something that is gaining real traction on the far right, and this shows how these issues are interconnected and how they are politically utilized against women and against minority groups and migrants and so on. And this brings us to geopolitics, where we see that the new Trump administration's US national security strategy specifically refers to the risk of so-called civilizational erasure in Europe, which is the process I just described, women given less births, and instead the society getting a higher proportion of migrants, as the Trump's national security strategy points out, leading to the risk of European countries becoming majority non-European. This is all directly linked to the opposition to gender that is also promoted by that administration. And this is also why the same national security strategy says that the Trump administration would work with patriotic forces in Europe to kind of oppose these trends. And we all know very well who these patriotic forces are in this house. And patriotic, again, goes in quotation marks, of course. So there's that. And last but not least, we see that the anti-gender discourse is also leveraged by other authoritarian countries, such as Russia, which is kind of becoming a global ambassador for, again, quotation marks, traditional values on the global stage. And they're using that to kind of legitimize their presence in the global south, to try to align with some other countries on traditional values, on opposition to gender equality as some kind of a corrupt Western concept, and this way pull these countries away from working with Europe towards being in a Russian orbit of influence. So we see how really supporting gender equality or not also defines where you stand in the world, and this is used as a kind of a geopolitical tool to re-engineer the global world order. And this is aimed, of course, at us and at this house that stands for gender equality, for equal rights, and for women's rights. So to finish, I just would like to say that anti-gender contestation is not a niche debate. It's not just about women's rights, but it's a main target of anti-democratic forces, and it's a structural challenge to our democracy and to our rights, and we really need to defend women's rights, thinking of defending the entire system in addition to just defending the people who need these rights. And this includes indeed even legislation such as the Digital Services Act, which has also been mentioned before, which is under attack by some leading international anti-gender organizations, in addition to the tech barons and other coalition of illiberal actors around the world. So these are some main findings from our research, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Vladislav. I think that it is actually well linked with the work that you do, Ségolène Pruvot, through especially the FIRST project, an alternative European. So it is, I think, a timely follow-up to everything that has been said. Can you tell us more about this FIRST project and about the analysis you made of anti-gender and anti-feminist movements across 8 member states?
Thank you, Emma, and thank you for the support you've demonstrated to the FIRST project. So I am director of European Alternatives, an organization that fights for equality, democracy, democracy, culture beyond the nation state. And I wanted to mention that because the promotions of women's rights and minoritized groups' rights is not only, but it's been said in many ways today, is not only a matter of those rights by themselves, but the matter of defending democracy and our democratic systems, and today in a matter of defending European democracy that is being widely attacked in all directions by extreme conservative forces. And of course, the work of EPF has been greatly important in showing that. So thank you for demonstrating that. And so European Alternatives has been involved for several years in a project called FIERCE, which was a research project financed by the European Commission. One of those projects that is widely attacked by some specific groups in the European Parliament, and that has been followed up by other projects that are being scrutinized at the moment, being the working group of the European Parliament. And so FIERCE was looking at feminist movements since the 2010s and anti-gender movements. So kind of looking at the relationship between them and of their developments and of their results. It is covering Spain, Denmark, Slovenia, France, Greece, Italy, Turkey and Poland. So you see that it's very different countries in terms of the state of women's rights, and it includes a country that is an accession country like Turkey, would like to to become like Turkey, and that has been coming out of but in which women's rights has been widely attacked in the last years. And and this work has been developed not only as an academic work, but with feminist movements in all these countries. So with collectives, smaller collectives, bigger feminist movements, analyzing the rise of anti-gender movement, and also taking stock of what has been developed. And what we find, and you can take 2 fact sheets when you get out of this room if you are interested, is an amazing diversity, richness and resilience of the feminist movement since 2011. So because today we've discussed a lot on the rise on anti-gender movements, the risk that is posed by the fact that they are so well funded. But we're also speaking about, since 2010, an amazing strength that has been developed by the feminist movements and that has gathered massive public support in Europe, and that we can build upon. And that is not something that, that is something that is extremely important. I'm referring to massive demonstrations such as Non Una Di Menos, Nutut. I'm referring to efficient organized mobilizations for legislative progress. We've mentioned, Nika from My Voice, My Choice was here. In Spain, the feminist movements has managed to gain rights for migrant women in terms of access to labor rights. And we're also talking about very bigger and smaller collective mobilizing at local and national level. And they fight to protect and enforce the rights of all women, including trans people, racialized women, and new visions and new forms of governance. Of course, they are facing massive attacks that is eroding their capacity of action. Organized physical and personal attacks, we've discussed it, online and offline, attacks on funding, and efficient lobbying by anti-gender movements in all levels of our democratic systems. I'm referring to a report on trans identification of minors that was published by the Senate in France, that was co-written by one of the anti-gender observatory, the observatory of the Little Mermaid. And And we also know, like, the strengths of fathers groups that have invented a syndrome of parental alienation, and that has trickled down to the justice system and has been quite important in legislation in the past years that is being reviewed, luckily, recently. And more than that, we are also facing attacks on discourse, profound anti-liberal and anti-democratic processes at work. What we found in the research is that the main areas of investments are, of course, the defense of the traditional family. So we find, again, all the religious movements and also some non-religious ones, secular conservative, who drive the narrative. The opposition to gender equality policies, we've discussed it. The rejections of the rights of LGBTQIA+ people. And in the last years, the instrumentalizations of the rights of trans people as the one core element that allows to play and to unlock a whole anti-democratic discourse by attacking a tiny minority on their rights. Of course, there is a questioning of sexual and reproductive health and rights, and the question of education and education to sexuality that is being attacked theoretically and pragmatically, and it's been mentioned as well. And the xenophobic discourse and racism and attack to racism. So we know it's massively funded. It has been demonstrated by EPF. But what we found, and I think one of the main highlights of the report you've presented is that the attacks on the European democracies are functioning in the EU, are de-democratizing the EU, and also that the fact that public funding has been massively increasing in proportion in terms of funding the anti-gender movements. So while the funding to European civil society is being attacked by some movements, actually the public funding that has been going through political foundations to anti-gender movements has been increasing enormously. And this is in the report. And the number of organizations as well. And they are led in majority by women. These 275 organizations that have been funding European anti-gender movement. And so basically what we see is the reappropriation and the instrumentalization of the question of women's rights by the conservatives, entering through this lens of gender, and so it's being very dangerous. But feminist movements have been strong, have been there, and what we proved with this, research, what we found out with this research is that the feminist movements have been extremely inventive, resilient, to invent new forms of action that can inspire us and help us defend democracy. First of all, there is the question of intersectionality. So looking at all minoritized groups and their rights and making alliances in order to achieve results and not looking at some people's rights only. The feminist movements have been innovating a lot on governance and new forms of governance discussion, types of organizations at the local level. They have been quite inventive in using the discourse, emotional discourse, in a way that can gather energies to fight for legal results. And we found that there is a whole book that has been published by this research that goes into strategic adaptability and productive resistance, including the use of digital media. So I just wanted to conclude saying that in today's context, what we found is the necessity to build inter-struggle alliances, feminist anti-racist, environmental actors. That's what is done through political movements as well, to defend democracy and like to really place democracy at the core of the fights for women's rights. And the way the MEPs have been doing it and is very important for the feminist movements is in listening and supporting. I mean, Nika mentioned as well how important it is to have the support of some institutions in a fight that is very difficult and exhausting. And also in scrutinizing the use of EU funds by anti-gender movements. And making sure feminist movements receive support, financial and symbolic. And finally, this has been mentioned today, but all the discussions about the AI Act and the digitalization, the digitalization of violence is extremely important. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you. I was, when you were talking, both of you, about the backlash, thinking about the mission that we had in South Korea, where with Maria we were there, and there it was really interesting because people were talking to us about, you know, this backlash against feminism that was happening everywhere in the world, also there in South Korea, where women's rights are not actually well advanced. There is no law for abortion. There is no law for equality for salary. There is a lot of progress still to be made, though the backlash is there. So it's kind of a proof to say that it is not because we have, you know, done too much. It is because there is a movement which is radicalized and actually anti-woman, anti-democracy, and we need to fight it without, I think, reconsidering whether or not we did the right things. I think that we did the right things and that we are still working really, really well. We still have, I think, 10 minutes. So, no, Joanna? It is not 5 minutes? Okay, so if anyone maybe wants to say a word from the room or not? No? Okay, perfect. So I would like to... go Maria.
My question is, we say always the wording backlash, but I think it's not really a backlash, it's a new situation. In my member state, in Germany, I always say the conservative would like to go back to 1950, the conservative. But the extremely right, it's not the idea to go back to 1950, it's the idea to go in a future, but in an absolute different future. And I think sometimes it's the wording backlash, not a right wording. The feeling is, 5 years ago or 20 years ago, the life was more easy. And many people are thinking this is the idea of a backlash. It's a new situation. For example, it's against the public schools. It's more for homeschooling. It's more for to change to split the society in the children age. Not later, and I think we need a better wording instead of backlash. Backlash means it was so nice in the past, and we would like to go back to this nice situation in the past. No, it's a very different situation. It's a situation, and the homeschooling situation, the situation for the press, freedom of press, and so on. This all would be killed. And it's not 1915.
And also maybe to add on something and make you react, both of you. I think that what's really interesting is that we obviously observe in the parliament, but also on social media, of course, what are the obsessions of nationalist, anti-gender activists, basically from the far right. I would summarize them by saying they are obsessed with trans people and Muslim people. And they are basically hiding their entire agenda, anti-woman, anti-gender, anti-Europe, anti-democracy, behind those two items. And I think that's quite interesting because actually what they are doing is completely, I mean, obviously not okay, and we're fighting that every day. But it also shows that they know what you have said. There is a massive support for women's rights in our countries, in Europe. They need to find also strategies to hide themselves behind what they believe can be a popular fight, which is terrible also because it shows that there is a rise in racism, in LGBTQI phobia in Europe, but they need still to strategize. And maybe what is your thinking about all of this? How do we unmask them? How do we make sure that they are seen for what we are actually doing? Because obviously we are here to also sometimes tell people who are in the middle, I'm talking, for example, of the right. We have succeeded, especially in the My Voice, My Choice initiative, in bringing actually the right to, for the most part, to vote for the initiative, especially in the parliament. It was not a done deal, because we were all hesitating actually whether or not it will pass in the parliament, but we have really succeeded in winning this. So maybe from the civil society and from a researcher point of view, where do you think are the seeds of success, maybe to find a good note to end this discussion?
Well, I will have a very simple answer. That is protecting democratic debate. And protecting the democratic debate means fighting disinformation, means engaging citizens into decisions making, and means involving all citizens and not only some citizens.
Yeah, I wanted to briefly comment on the backlash comment. I think it's a very good observation. I think indeed it's not that we've done something that we've gone too far and now there's backlash. It is indeed an alternative project. And the anti-gender, I mean, some of them, the most radical of the religious ones at least, for them they're worried about something else that happened in Germany. It's the Reformation that really, spoiled everything, and we need to go back to the medieval times and to build from there. So there is really, like a whole alternative idea for how our future should look like, but this is for the religious ones. And for the political side, it is this kind of a global illiberal alliance that we're seeing. And I think that to go to the question of unmasking, I think increasingly they're no longer hiding that. I mean, definitely if you look at Donald Trump, he's saying things very clearly. And maybe here the key is to take them seriously when they say these things. And at the same time, if you look at some online culture that is spreading radicalization across borders, a lot of this anti-gender and anti-feminist sentiment comes in a form of irony, and people are like saying, oh, it's just a joke, oh, it's just a meme, but actually also we need to take this thing seriously. This is not a joke, and they're very often open actually about what they want to do, and it's just yeah, it's just exactly, it's this Overton window, as you say. Yeah, like it starts all as a small joke and then it grows and becomes acceptable. We should take it seriously and never accept it and not let it spread.
Thank you. Please note that this is not the end of the day, because starting at 17:45 in this room, you can attend the movie screening of the Italian movie There's Still Tomorrow. This is an independent Italian production. I'm also saying that from the cult committee point of view, this is really important. A movie that addresses women's emancipation and women's right to vote. Enjoy everyone and have a good break. Thank you.